Well, good afternoon for those of you in the Northeast. Good morning for those on the West Coast, and wherever you are in the world. Hello from Sunraven. Robin and Michael here.
Hello,
We've
everybody.
been on a little hiatus for the last couple of weeks. I'll call it the hurricane hiatus. We had, it wasn't the most intense storm, but it did knock down a lot of trees, and we were out power and internet for essentially a week. So we missed this particular subject's talk, Communicating for Health, at that time, and we're now just getting back into communication. So let's consider one of the things for today is how technical difficulties could affect our communication. And of course, many of us too are becoming increasingly aware of our dependency, our codependency, maybe even our attachment to technology, specifically social media, which is a great thing because that's how we're connecting to you today. On the other hand, when we miss it, when it's disconnected for technical reasons, a lot of people have expressed some degree of anxiety in association with not necessarily having their usual go-to entertainment or communication. One of the most vital things, of course, for our devices is that we can communicate with each other at distance and through time, and that really, the connection to me is one of the most important things. So we're grateful to be able to have this opportunity to spend some time with you today and talk about this subject, which is near and dear to our hearts, communication, because in any relationship, of course, communication may be the most important concept to grapple with, to learn, to develop skills, because without healthy, effective communication, we wind up being somewhat more disconnected than we'd like. And so if in essence the reasons we want to communicate with people is to connect to them, we realize how important communication is. It's fundamental. The other thing that I would mention is, we could think of communication specifically in terms of the relationship itself. And that could be any relationship. It could be a partnership. It could be children and their parents. It could be friends. It could be coworkers. It could be, at the grocery store. And, when communication breaks down, then of course your needs may not get met directly. Or there may be confusion and it's just not efficient or effective. But the other aspect of communication when it breaks down, especially in important relationships, but even in some minor incidental ones, when we experience the disconnect or when we experience frustration because we're not effectively communicating or somebody isn't effectively understanding what we're trying to communicate, then there is an effect in the body. So let's just consider frustration or irritation. You can't get somebody to understand what you're trying to say, or they're not following the directions, wherever you're prescribing. And you're experiencing that in some way as frustration. Well, your body, you may mentally note, oh, that's frustration, but your body responds to frustration / anger with an activation of the physiological processes in the body. So the fight or flight response could be activated when you're upset, angry, irritated. And that then has effects downstream into the other areas of health that you've heard me speak about specifically, which is how it's all related. And if fast is the disease, then slow is the medicine. If inflammation is a result of the fast world or the irritating world that's not moving at the speed you want, then your body responds by being inflamed, irritated, and potentially, if it's chronic and significant enough, diseased. So communication has those two features. One is the relationship itself and what you're trying to get cooperation about, and partnership and all the beauty in partnerships. But the other is you need harmony, and you need to be able to effectively communicate for your body's sake. And so this is a subject which is, as I said before, really central. So Robin, I would start, that's my introduction, but Robin is the expert in this team in terms of relationships and in terms of how important communication is between people. And the question, I guess, I would start, with, in your address of this is, how do you see the subject of communication arising for people? Like, what do you hear from people when they come to you and they describe their lives or their situation? How do you assess how people are communicating? I guess that's part one. And number two, when you sense that there could be some improvement, how do you approach it?
Okay, well, the first question, absolutely, it is possible to enhance your awareness, which is what we're sharing today, about the question to yourself. I think people that do come in to see me usually feel deprived in some sense. They don't feel that their needs are getting met and that they're not being received by other, whether it's a spouse or if it's a parent and a child. So we could start there a little bit, because children, when we're little, we need to be seen, acknowledged, and echoed back, and we can call it different things, like a mirror. So that's essential to understand. And I think talking about the health component, I'd like to start there a little bit, because when I work with my clients, it's an individual process and it is a skill. So where to begin with that is first to meet the person where they are actually at, how they see themselves, and if they are able to actually have the awareness to learn a little bit deeper of actually what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, and what the need is.
So when you see somebody that come to you, what are some of the words, phrases that they use which clues you into the fact that something is going on as far as their ability to communicate with others that is affecting them? So what might they say to you?
Okay, what might they say to me when they come in? Well, again, I think I'm sort of answering the question at the same time. Everyone is different. Most of the time, they are not feeling heard and seen and acknowledged. And this is that projection out into the outer, whether it's whatever, it's your partner or your child or your mother, that people are not feeling seen and acknowledged.
Okay, so they might say to you something like, my girlfriend is not sort of understanding that I need to have a day off every week, or
right.
So there's something that a person has stated that they're trying to express, but somebody isn't really hearing it. Or a mother may say, my kids aren't cleaning their room, I've told them 1,000 times.
Great examples.
And so these are, so my point in bringing this up is that this is pretty ubiquitous. Everyone has experienced the thought that somebody isn't getting what they're trying to say. Mm-hmm. And so it works two ways, though. So what you're saying is, well, maybe they're not getting it. Maybe they're just dense. Maybe they're not paying attention. But the skill orientation that I think I know you talk to people about is, how are you communicating? How do you first identify what you want to say? What's your truth? What's in your heart? What's important to you? And how do you express that so that a person will understand it? Which then gets into two things, right? Which is, first, it's got to be clear expression of what you mean. So it can't be, or it may not be ideal to be inflammatory in your expression, because that might put somebody on the defensive but will close them down. So you need to first express it, but you also need to have a technique of expression which doesn't trigger the other person. And then, of course, in couples, you work with the two people, or in families, you might work with several people to learn to give and receive the other people in the relationship, where there's then mutual shared responsibility and there is some general rules. So maybe we should talk about the latter. So when people, let's say a couple, because I think a lot of people listening to us, might have issues with their children or their older parents. But I think my experience, is the most important of the relationships we have is if we have a partner or want to have a partner, is how we communicate effectively, because that intimate relationship, that very special relationship, is really going to create a lot of harmony or disharmony for us if it's not going well. So in partnerships, how do you approach two people to break it down a little bit, to get them to appreciate how to approach this?
Right. Okay. So we'll keep it simple because we have a short amount of time today. Just the most important thing is to be curious and caring. Now, that sounds simple, right? To be curious. Curious with yourself to understand what it is that you are actually trying to communicate with your partner. Those are that is the most basic and the hardest to understand. Back to what I was sharing earlier, how important it is to be clear and intentional about what it is that you would like to communicate to the other person.
Right. But then the curious side of it is for the listener to try to hear that intention. In other words, maybe the words don't come out so clearly, but instead of picking on the words or reacting to the energy, even, I'm curious, what is, my partner trying to express to me? What is in their heart that in all likelihood has some validity, at least to them, that is important enough for them to try to communicate it with me, rather than to tear it down or dismiss it. But what's the essence here? And that's the curious part. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, yes. On both ends as well, because you go in, it's a partnership, and communicating it's literally an art, and it's a living dynamic.
So are you saying that the person who's trying to express something, like I'm expressing I need to take that day off, I need to be curious?
Well, you need to be curious about awareness of how you're going to deliver that.
Okay.
To say it's me or...
So curious about maybe how is this going to come across, how am I saying it? I'm curious almost about my own energy, because if I could feel the energy, I can maybe have a better chance of modifying it if I need to deliver it successfully.
Yes.
A lot of people, of course, know this. If you're angry and you just shout it out or you burst it out,
it comes across as a demand.
You may have an underlying feeling that's quite legitimate. Right. You didn't honor our commitment of time, let's say, to show up at the right time, or whatever. So I could be upset by that. That's sort of legitimate. But if I'm angry and the tone is such, and instead of, it really is important to me to have seen you tonight, or, to hear, you said you were going to call me at 3:00 and, I waited and you didn't call me. Okay. There's something legitimate there. But if I was curious as to, okay, so I have this heartfelt need to be seen, respected, honored, cared for, I could share that in a different way than, you screwed up, you didn't call me.
Right. Well, that's a evaluation where we want to be inside is observational of what the impact was or is for the person who feels let down by the other person. So with love and kindness and respect, and again, how do we do that when you're upset is to be aware that you have the feeling, and then we want to get to the need, because the need is the most important thing. And I sort of moved too quickly. It's so important when you approach someone to communicate, especially when it's a sensitive topic or you're upset, is to ask the person if they're available, and to give them a little bit of a headliner of what you might be sharing, so they're not blown out of the water. And this all contributes to a pause and the slowing, which is the slow medicine. Right. Pausing and presence are the most key important.
Yeah. Well, that signals right away that you sort of respect the other person, so that you may be going to share something that needs, some serious thought or attention, but you want to respect the fact that they may or may not have their mind in place at the moment. Maybe they're busy doing something else, or they're upset themselves about something maybe unrelated, in fact, but they're just not settled down enough to have that level of curiosity to really just hear and try to feel the intention behind all the words, and to really receive it and to consider it the way you want. I mean, communication is really, you're asking somebody, please consider what I feel or think, and have that enter into your thought process, and let's together try to feel this out and either just learn and stay connected about each other, or maybe there's some point to the communication which is we need to make a decision. And so two people want to be able to openly share without constantly battling of wills and the power struggle, which is often a hallmark of relationships. And that often is, I think, a reflection of communication that has not really been consistent. So then people feel anxious about broaching a subject because they're not confident that it's going to work out, where they're going to get heard completely. So they rush to insist or force their desired outcome.
Absolutely. So we want to build and or restore trust.
Yeah.
And to your point, it's really important if the last time you went to speak about a sensitive topic and there wasn't a solution or a resolve around it, and it's still sort of lingering, we really have to check into ourselves to see where we are, so we're grounded and present and clear about what we actually want to present to the other person. Now that is not easy, with our busy lives, and also for the sender to not be multitasking and taking care of children and trying to discipline them while cooking dinner, and we're just in a reactive mode. So we want to respond opposed to reactivity, which are some really good points to consider.
I especially appreciate what you said, which is there needs to be, the point you were making is some consistency in the previous communications, so that there is, again, some security in knowing that it's going to be okay. If the last series of topics, discussions were blew out of the water,
somebody walked out,
then you're not going to feel calm. In fact, that's why people tend to rush it. They get it all out. If they have somebody's ear, they not only talk about the original topic, but they add 2 more, 3 more that have been building up. So the idea that you talked about is, this is sort of like a work in progress, especially in partnerships, but also in families, or around the subject of kids too. You can have some standard, let's say, rules that first I'll speak, and then of course you will always get a chance to speak. First, I'll share my thoughts. My job is to be neutral, not accusing anyone, not being too worked up or emotional, and if I am, I sort of wait till I'm a little calmer. So I've got some sort of responsibility, but then I'll finish what I'm saying, and you will always, like say to a kid, have a chance to respond, and I'll listen to you in kind. Now, I might not always agree to follow, like say with a kid, what they want, but they know they'll be heard, and then you'll thoughtfully consider with them and maybe explain to them what you feel is the better decision while you have that authority as a parent. In couples, it's maybe a little bit more equal in terms of authority, but the same type of rule can apply, right? Whereas, there is this exchange, whereas I get to speak and, sort of complete my sentence and the thought, and I'll trust and I'll know, because we have this rule, that you're going to listen to it in full. And then you get a chance in certain types of discussions to respond, and we can go back and forth that way in keeping sort of in love, with high regard and respect for each other. And then over time, if that's how it's been going, there's less anxiety having these conversations. And that anxiety, of course, just adds insult to injury. There's already often in relationships something going on that's a little upsetting. And if you already add to that anxiety about having the conversation to begin with and how that's going to go, you're not starting off in the most balanced, calm place. And then you said curiosity, and then the other word you said was care. So part of the reason you do this is because you care. This is like a really important subject.
And you can imagine putting yourself in the other person's shoes. And the key, I think the most important thing is to think about the which we can all practice today, whether we're judging or we have this story, And it's really important for us we can express that to another person. And if we use those words, this is what I made up about you not getting home on time. Take ownership for it. What we tend to do is blame and project onto the other person, and that already is going to create, a wall that goes up, and then it's, wrong versus right. So we want to take wrong versus right out of the equation.
Makes me think of another important thing. So in communication, again, to any person, whether it's a partner, a child, a friend, coworker, person at the grocery store, part of the work in communicating is to get in better touch with yourself and communicate with yourself. And that often requires a diving in, and sometimes some form of therapy, some form of, therapists, sometimes there's a stigma associated with it, but like, to me, the best role a therapist can play is, especially if they're good and neutral, observant and caring themselves, they can help you see yourself a little bit more effectively. And that, to me, is the subject. In other words, can I see myself well? I understand my own nature, habits, style, that I may learn about myself, because some of those things may not be supportive of my desire to be an effective communicator. And so it's just the way you sort of fine-tune your delivery. And that starts with, is there anything going on underneath the surface in you that's causing agitation by itself? Yes, it could also frequently be the partner in the relationship, but it's also a lot about life in general, and who I am being, and how I've been conditioned, and what are the conditions of my life. And for that, a lot of people are building up a lot that's being retained, and that makes this caring, curious, outward expression of communication more challenging. So part of all of this is your own work.
I want to just add to finding a good listener, a therapist, or a friend. You can take, and women tend to have a little easier time, I think. I'm generalizing here, but share with a friend and ask them to help you. What do you hear? What do you hear that I'm trying to say? And someone could be objective from the outside. So that's really, really important, to take the time. Therapists, speak to a friend, and then you can do your own. Empathy is a word that really is essential for this to be successful, including a little of your own if you're sitting in meditation, and getting underneath to what the core, root, and it usually is an unmet need. And so many of my clients, when I ask them what they need, and they don't really know, however, they can tell me about what the other person didn't do, or the situation. So this is quite an art to understand what it is that you actually need, and then how to present that in a loving way and non-blaming. And usually people, when someone has a need and they're soft in communication, their energy needs to be soft, the other person wants to lean in.
Right. Yeah, so I think, while couples, families often benefit from somebody to sit with all the people involved at the same time to help construct, say, the rules, and to get buy-in from everyone around, and to support the process by sometimes modeling dialogues and communications. There is a real, I think, important thing for individuals to do on their own, where they use somebody trusted to give them some help in seeing themselves.
Clarity.
And that gets into another thing that I often speak about, that there is obviously the feelings that we have, the thoughts and feelings that we have, that we need to work on, let's say, with a therapist, just to stay calm internally. But there's a role that's of also the self-care extending into your body, in terms of how you take care of your body. If your body, as an example, is in pain or is inflamed, or you're on the roller coaster ride, as so many people are, of glycemic load, so they're eating inconsistently, or carbohydrates in certain forms, simple sugars, their blood sugar is up and down all the time. If they're not sleeping well, they are just not, no matter how clear their heart is in terms of intention, curiosity, caring, if their body is screaming out because it's exhausted or it's not stable metabolically, well, then it doesn't help. So we need also to look at our body. And then, as I've also shared, we also need to look at our spirit. In the end, we want a good body. We want these good relationships because we want to have a meaningful, purposeful life. And that gets us closer to why are we alive to begin with. And there is value in the full gamut of self-care, which communication is a very big, vital, central part, but it is in relationship itself to all these other parts of our being. And so to be a good communicator in some ways requires dedication, some devotion, and practices and discipline in these other areas of the body, mind, and spirit.
Nourishing yourself.
Yeah. And that gets into the whole model of slow medicine and the different things that we talk to people about, taking an inventory of themselves on all these different levels to just see where there's opportunities for improvement. When little bits and pieces are improved or all around the edges, the sum of the parts becomes greater. And we don't have to fix everything perfectly. We just have to keep being mindful and attentive to a number of different variables, and things improve. Communication, though, as we were just sharing, is central, because in the end we try to express ourselves. We want other people to see us, care about us. We want to be caring, and being able to help other people, and all of that requires our ability to express ourselves effectively. And so that's today's subject, is communicating for health. And we thank you for joining us. Robin, do you have any final words?
No, I just say, keep awareness, open your mind to be curious about yourself, what you might be feeling. I know it sounds sort of simple, but like, wow, what's really going on for me right now? And work on empathy and loving yourself. Again, I think that's the most important key word here, loving yourself, so you're a softer, open vehicle for other people and create that safety.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
This is a topic that we could go on for many more moments.
And we invite you to reach out to us, of course, if you want to talk to us about your situation and how we may be able to support you.
Right.
Communication, we didn't mention, though we spoke about it a few weeks ago, community. There's just a whole other aspect of how communities support communication and hold the space and create the environments in the space, and then help us with some of these other surrounding variables, or mind, body, spirit, because the greater we have all of that coming together, the easier it is, the more lovely it is, the more loving it is. So take care of yourself is a really good message. You can reach us at slowmedicine.org, call us, email us, and we'll be back next week to speak to you about another subject that we hope is of interest and value to you all. Yes. So we hope you have a great week.
Have a beautiful week.
Yeah, and stay in touch with us. Take care.